Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
Today, Friday, March 26th, is the feast of Saint Castulus, martyr. And these are today's headlines. Over 300 people have been killed in Myanmar as military leaders attempt to quell protests over last month's military coup. Ethiopia's president says Eritrean troops will be withdrawn from Ethiopia's volatile Tigray region. And in an effort to make vaccines available to the most marginalized, the Vatican will be providing vaccines to about 1,200 people during Holy Week. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story today, the latest reports from Myanmar say that over 300 people have been killed by security forces in the country since last month's military takeover. As Linda Bordoni reports, a group of observers that monitors the deaths and arrests of protesters said today its tally of 320 deaths included only documented cases, with the actual number of casualties feared to be much higher.
3 protesters were shot and killed by security forces in Yangon on Friday, and Myanmar's Assistance Association for Political Prisoners said 11 others were killed on Thursday. It also revealed that almost 3,000 protesters have been arrested, charged or sentenced in the crackdown since the February 1st coup that ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. Most of them, including Suu Kyi and President Win Myint, remain detained. The army's seizure of power halted the Southeast Asian nation's move towards democracy that began when Suu Kyi's party took office in 2016 for its first term after more than 5 decades of military rule. In the early hours of Friday morning, unidentified people reportedly tossed firebombs at the headquarters of Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party in Yangon, but nearby residents managed to put out the fire before it could cause any major damage. Pope Francis has called for dialogue and a stop to violence in Myanmar, noting that many people, especially the young, are losing their lives to offer hope to their country. The Catholic bishops of the Southeast Asian nation have also repeatedly urged the military to refrain from violence and peacefully resolve the crisis through dialogue. The popular movement against the junta and its takeover received a major boost on Thursday when the United States and Britain announced tough sanctions against 2 military-owned conglomerates with vast holdings in many sectors. All this while Myanmar's homegrown civil disobedience movement against military rule is targeting the economy in order to make it difficult for the junta to govern. As rallies continue to take place across the nation, organisers have called for widespread protests on Saturday, observed as Armed Forces Day and commemorating the start of the military's resistance to Japanese occupation in 1945. I'm Linda Bordoni.
In Africa, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has said Eritrea will pull its troops out of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. Nathan Morley has this report.
This move suggests a possible breakthrough in the conflict in which both Eritrean and Ethiopian armed forces have been accused of abuses including rape and murder. The Prime Minister ordered troops into Tigray back in November last year, after accusing the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which are known as the TPLF, of attacking army camps and army units. The TPLF, which ran Tigray state, was the most powerful member of Ethiopia's ruling coalition for decades, but Abiy's election in 2018 curbed its influence. During the heavy fighting, it was denied by Abiy that Eritrean troops were active in the area, which was a contradiction of accounts from people on the ground, including military and civilians. Now Abiy has finally admitted Eritrea's involvement, and Eritrea, for its part, has agreed to pull out troops from the region. Ethiopia and Eritrea fought a border war that began over 20 years ago. Amid the conflict, relief agencies, including the UNHCR, expressed concern at a lack of fuel, food and medicines in the region. During November and December last year, thousands died and more than 40,000 refugees fled to neighbouring Sudan. Despite the TPLF being ousted from power in Tigray at the end of November and Mr. Abiy declaring the conflict was over, fighting is actually continuing in some parts of the region. For Vatican Radio, this is Nathan Morley reporting.
From the Vatican, the Office of Papal Charities is working to ensure that the vulnerable and marginalized in society have access to COVID-19 vaccines. Some 1,200 homeless people will have the opportunity of being vaccinated in the Vatican during Holy Week. Father Benedict Mayaki has that story.
As the world continues to adopt measures to combat the ongoing health emergency, the Office of Papal Charities, in response to Pope Francis's numerous appeals that no one be excluded from receiving the COVID-19 vaccines, is taking action to accompany the most vulnerable. A statement released on Friday said that during Holy Week, 1,200 of the poorest and most marginalized people will have the opportunity of getting vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, the same the Pope and the employees of the Holy See received. The vaccines will be administered in a specially designed facility inside the Paul VI Hall in the Vatican. The doses were purchased by the Holy See and are offered by the Spallanzani Hospital through the Vatican COVID-19 Commission. The statement further informs of an opportunity to share the wonder of charity towards our poorest and our most vulnerable brothers and sisters, and to give them the opportunity to access treatment and vaccination. The faithful can pay for the vaccine for a person in need via an online donation through the Holy Father's charity account managed by the Office of Papal Charities. Pope Francis himself has repeatedly encouraged everyone to get vaccinated because it is a way of exercising responsibility for one's neighbor and the collective well-being. He has repeatedly stressed the importance of equal access to vaccines regardless of status. In his 2020 message on the solemnity of the Nativity of the Lord, the Pope appealed to governments, businesses and international organizations to ensure vaccines for all, especially for the most vulnerable and needy of all regions in the planet. He said that in the face of a challenge that knows no borders, we cannot erect walls, as all of us are in the same boat. Meanwhile, in January, when the vaccination campaign began in the Vatican, the Holy Father requested that 50 needy people be among the first to be vaccinated. Many of them are among the homeless who live around St. Peter's Basilica and are assisted by the residential facilities of the Office of Papal Charities. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
Meanwhile, European Union leaders have agreed amongst themselves to toughen export controls of coronavirus vaccines amid a row with Britain over deliveries. At a summit, which was also attended by U.S. President Joe Biden, the EU leaders stressed the importance of a reliable global supply chain of COVID-19 vaccinations. Stefan Boss has this report.
European Union leaders met virtually to avoid coronavirus infections as they try to figure out how to vaccinate most of the EU's nearly 450 million people against COVID-19. The EU's Commissioner for Trade, Valdis Dombrovskis, complained that Britain fell short in delivering coronavirus jabs to the European Union.
Just since the introduction of the export authorization system, some 10 million doses had been exported from EU to UK, and 0 doses had been exported from UK to EU.
The EU has especially condemned Anglo-Swedish manufacturer AstraZeneca. It wants the company to catch up on deliveries to the EU before exporting doses elsewhere. At the summit, EU leaders also agreed to extend export controls on jabs produced within the bloc. The 27-nation bloc has been accused by Britain and the World Health Organization of so-called vaccine nationalism. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned the EU not to impose blockades.
I don't think that blockades of either vaccines or of medicines, of ingredients for vaccines are sensible. And I think that the long-term damage done by blockades can be very considerable.
Those sentiments are echoed by the former president of the EU's Executive European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker.
This could create major reputation damage to the European Union. We are not in war and we are not enemies, we are allies.
The tensions underscore frustration in Europe over a lack of vaccines, as several member states on the continent saw the deadliest outbreaks of the pandemic, with Italy reporting more than 106,000 deaths, France 93,000, Germany 75,000 and Spain 73,000 coronavirus deaths. There has been anger within the EU that the United States and Britain are not yet participating in vaccine distribution to impoverished nations. For now, EU states and other nations still face vaccine shortages at a time when the coronavirus continues to claim lives. For Vatican Radio, I am Stefan Bos in Budapest.
On Friday morning, Pope Francis, along with his closest collaborators in the Roman Curia, listened to the fourth Lenten homily by Cardinal Raniero Cantalamessa. This week, the preacher of the papal household reflected on what it means to be in a genuine, loving relationship with Jesus, which goes beyond all theological and doctrinal discussions and notions, precisely because God is love. With more on Cardinal Cantalamessa's reflections, here's Robin Gomes.
The greatest and most inaccessible mystery for the human mind is not that God is one and triune, but that God is love, who loves and gives himself up for me, a miserable and ungrateful creature. Jesus cannot be known as a person unless one enters into a personal relationship from an I to a you with him. This was the heart of the Lenten sermon that the preacher of the papal household, Cardinal Raniero Cantalamessa, preached to Pope Francis and members of the Roman Curia on Friday. The fact that Jesus, true man and true God, is a single person entails discovering and proclaiming that he is not an idea, a historical issue, or just a character, but he is a person and a living one for that matter. This, the Cardinal said, is what is lacking and what we need most to prevent Christianity from being reduced to ideology or simply to theology. The Capuchin Cardinal humbly admitted that he knew books, doctrines, heresies, and concepts on Jesus, but did not know him as a living person present here and now. Until then, he said, he had an impersonal knowledge of the person of Christ. What he lacked was the experience of St. Paul with the person of Jesus on the road to Damascus. Speaking about the notion of a person within the Trinity, Cardinal Cantalamessa said that in God it means relationship, being in relationship. That is why he said, Jesus cannot be known as a person unless one enters into a personal relationship from an I to you with him. And this is what Pope Francis urges in his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. When one is loved by Christ and he or she loves him in return, Cardinal Cantalamessa said, tribulations such as those mentioned by St. Paul in his letter to the Romans, as well as our current COVID-19 pandemic, will not be able to separate us from the love of Christ. For if God is for us, who can be against us? I am Robin Gomes.
One final note, the film Francesco by Oscar-nominated director Evgeny Ifanievsky, which is dedicated to Pope Francis, is set to begin streaming globally on Sunday, the 28th of March, on the Discovery Plus channel, following an opening in virtual cinemas. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, please be sure to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also get the latest updates on our Facebook page and via Twitter. Many thanks to our technicians and our producers in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells.